They said the village of Obioma was blessed. Its farmers harvested yams so big they needed 2 men to carry them. Its wrestlers were so fierce that songs were sung in their honor. And once every year, at the New Yam Festival, wealth and beauty were decided by sweat and blood. The man with the biggest yam became the richest. The man who won the wrestling match took the hand of the most beautiful maiden. But there was a problem. The maiden they all desired was Agbomma, the Igwe's only daughter. And Agbomma had a secret fire in her eyes that no man could tame. For years, she had watched the contests, watched the strongest men fall in the dust, watched the champions rise with pride, and then watched them kneel before her with marriage on their lips. And every year she gave the same answer. One wrestler broke down in tears at her refusal. Another struck his chest in shame before leaving the village forever. 15 suitors in total had tried and failed, yet Agbomma never wavered. She sat with grace beside her father, her smile polite, her voice calm, her refusals unshaken. The villagers whispered in the evenings. "She is too proud," some said. "She is waiting for a true spirit," others argued. And the old women by the stream clucked their tongues, wondering what kind of man could ever soften a heart like hers. Agbomma only kept her silence. She knew what she wanted, or perhaps what she feared. The day came again. The yam heap stood high, the drums thundered, the air smelled of roasted tubers and palm wine. The crowd gathered in the square, buzzing with excitement. The wrestlers oiled their bodies, their muscles gleaming under the sunday. One by one, they fought, the ground trembling with every throw, the crowd roaring with every fall. And then, just as the last match was about to begin, silence fell. From the crowd, a stranger stepped forward. He was taller than any man there, his shoulders broad, his arms carved with power. His skin seemed to hold its own light, as though the sun had left a mark on him alone. And his eyes, deep, endless, made even the boldest wrestlers shift uneasily. "Who is he?" the people whispered. "Where has he come from?" The dogs in the square began to whine. The drums slowed and faltered. And in that moment, as the stranger's gaze swept across the crowd and found Agbomma, she who had refused 15 men before felt something stir within her chest. Something she could not refuse. Nobody knew his name, nor where he had come from. The moment he stepped into the square, the village forgot how to breathe. His skin seemed to carry its own light, glowing faintly even under the burning afternoon sunday. His eyes were dark pools, endless and unreadable, and when he spoke, his voice rolled over the crowd with power, smooth and commanding, without the need to shout. "I am Nduka," he said simply. "Let me wrestle." The elders exchanged uneasy glances. A stranger appearing on the sacred day of the New Yam Festival, asking to join their contest, it had never happened before. Yet the Igwe rose from his carved ivory seat, his gaze steady. "If he is brave enough to stand in the circle," the Igwe declared, "then let him prove his strength." Nduka stepped into the chalked ring, and the air shifted. A heaviness settled over the square. The older villagers felt at first a chill that crept along their skin despite the heat. Dogs began to whine and back away. Chickens scattered as if some unseen predator had entered their midst. But the young ones only leaned forward with eager eyes, too thrilled to notice the signs. The match began. Nduka moved like no man they had ever seen. His strength was immense, but it was his speed, swift, precise, unnatural, that made the crowd fall silent. Every opponent he faced fell in moments. Even the 2 undefeated champions of Obioma, men as strong as palm trees, were tossed into the dust as if they were children. Nduka's chest rose and fell steadily. Not a drop of sweat touched his brow. When he stood alone in the circle, victorious, the silence broke into wild cheers. Palm wine was brought. Drums thundered. Flutes sang. Young men watched him with awe. Women whispered behind their wrappers, their eyes lingering on his face and form. But the greatest surprise came from Agbomma. The Igwe's daughter, who had refused 15 suitors without so much as a smile, now sat with her eyes fixed on the stranger. She clapped when he won. She smiled when he raised his hand in triumph. For the first time, the most desired maiden in Agbomma seemed moved. The villagers gasped and exchanged whispers. When the sun sank and shadows stretched long across the square, Nduka walked straight toward the Igwe's palace. His steps were steady, his head high, the crowd following him at a distance, waiting for the moment Agbomma would surely refuse him, as she had all the others. The palace courtyard flickered with the light of oil lamps. Shadows danced across carvings of ancestors and the skulls of beasts the Igwe had slain in his youth. Nduka stood before the throne, his gaze locked with the rulers. Questions were asked: his name, his home, his intentions, and he answered with a calm that never wavered. The Igwe, after a long pause, nodded. "My daughter shall be your wife." The crowd gasped again. And even more shocking, Agbomma did not protest. She stepped forward, her face lit by the lamps, and accepted with a smile. For the first time, Agbomma's jewel had chosen, and she had chosen a man no one knew. The square erupted in celebration, but among the older women, unease lingered. They whispered to one another in low tones. Something about Nduka unsettled them, though they could not explain why. Still, Agbomma's happiness drowned their doubts, and the festival carried on long into the night. Agbomma's heart raced like a drum. At last, she had found him, the man who seemed carved from her dreams. Nduka's handsomeness was almost painful to look at, and his quiet strength pulled at her in a way no other suitor ever had. All the years of saying no, of turning her back on men who begged for her hand, suddenly felt worth it. This one was different. This one, she told herself, was hers. That night, she could not sleep. She lay on her mat, staring into the shadows, her lips curved in a secret smile. She imagined children with his strong frame and her eyes. She pictured the life they would build, a life filled with laughter, wealth, and respect. In the silence of her chamber, she whispered thanks to the ancestors for sending him to her. By morning, plans were already in motion. Nduka had said he must return to his home quickly, and so the wedding was fixed for the very next day. His urgency raised whispers, but Agbomma didn't care. She was too eager, too hungry for the life that awaited her. The women worked tirelessly through the night, preparing her attire, stringing beads, and cooking feasts for the guests. The men slaughtered goats and brought out jars of palm wine, their voices booming with celebration. The wedding was dazzling. Agbomma glowed like the sun itself, her skin oiled and smooth, her dress of the finest cloth shimmering with cowries that caught every flicker of light. Nduka stood tall beside her, calm and unshaken, receiving greetings with the dignity of a king. The villagers sang, danced, and cheered, swept up in joy, though a shadow of unease still lingered among the elders who watched him closely. When the time came for her to leave, Agbomma kissed her parents, clutched her small bundle of belongings, and stepped forward. Nduka walked ahead, his strides long and powerful, as if the earth itself bent beneath his feet. She followed eagerly, her heart pounding with excitement. But soon the path grew strange. They walked for miles through forests she had never seen, across streams that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The trail twisted, turned, and doubled back, as if leading them in circles. Trees loomed thicker and darker, their branches knitting together above them until no sky showed through. The forest grew quiet, too quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves, though no wind stirred. Agbomma's joy began to fray. Her feet ached, her legs trembled. At last, she stopped and called out, her voice carrying a note of impatience. "My husband, where is your village? How far must we go?" Nduka did not answer. He kept walking, steady as stone, not sparing her even a glance. Her unease deepened. She tried again, louder this time, her voice sharp. "Nduka, do you hear me?" Still nothing, only the crunch of their footsteps and the eerie rustle of unseen movement in the trees. Her throat burned with thirst. "Water," she demanded, her voice breaking. "Bring me water." Without a word, Nduka lifted his hand. From the empty air, a cup appeared, shimmering as if it were not made of clay, wood, or metal, but of something otherworldly. He held it out to her. Agbomma froze. The water inside was crystal clear, cold, as though drawn from the deepest well. Yet she had seen it form out of nothing. Her hand trembled as she accepted it. She drank, and though the water quenched her thirst, it sent a chill through her chest. She stared at the cup. It shifted under her fingers, solid yet strange, its surface flickering like moonlight trapped in stone. For the first time since she met Nduka, fear began to creep into her heart. Agbomma's joy began to crumble piece by piece. The cup of water had opened her eyes, and now she noticed things she had been too blind with excitement to see. Nduka's steps made no sound. Even when dried leaves cracked under her own feet, his tread was silent, as if the earth itself dared not record his passing. She listened for his breathing, but there was none, only the eerie hush of the forest, broken now and then by the distant cry of unseen animals. Her unease deepened with every step. When they reached a wide river, Agbomma halted. The water stretched before them, dark and restless, swollen by the season's rains. She expected him to stop, to look for a canoe, to suggest another way. Instead, Nduka walked forward and stepped onto the surface. His feet did not sink. He crossed the rushing river as though it were hard ground, leaving behind no ripple, no trace. Agbomma froze. Her heart hammered in her chest. "Come," he said simply. She shook her head, rooted to the spot. But in the next breath, he was beside her. His arms lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. He carried her across, but the sensation was wrong. It did not feel like a man holding his wife. It felt like she was drifting through air, borne by something that did not belong to flesh. On the other side, her fear grew sharper. The forest twisted around them. Trees she had seen on one side suddenly appeared on the other without them turning. Shadows shifted in ways that made no sense. From the corners of her eyes, she saw animals crouched in the dark, their eyes glowing with a light that was not natural. When she tried to focus on them, their shapes blurred, melted, and changed into forms she could not name. The very air seemed heavier, pressing against her chest. Each breath came shallow, as though she were moving through a world that was no longer her own. When Nduka finally stopped, she thought they had reached a resting place. But the rock he sat upon was no rock at all. Agbomma stared in horror. It was a giant skull, bleached white, its hollow sockets wide and empty. And within those sockets, small flames burned without wood, without fuel, dancing as though mocking her fear. Nduka lowered himself onto the skull like it was a throne, his expression calm, his body relaxed, as if this grotesque seat was the most natural thing in the world. Agbomma clutched her wrapper tightly. Every hair on her body rose. The forest did not sound right either. No birds, no chirping insects. Instead, she heard faint whispers drifting through the trees. Voices speaking in tongues she had never heard, their tones rising and falling like incantations. Then came the sound of moaning low, drawn out, almost human. Agbomma shivered. She forced herself to whisper, "Nduka, do you not hear it? The voices, the crying?" He turned his head slowly, his eyes glinting faintly in the dark. For a moment she thought they glowed. His lips curled into a faint smile. "You are tired," he said softly. "Your mind plays tricks." His words gave no comfort. They only deepened her dread. By dawn, her legs ached, her throat was dry, and her body felt like it would collapse. But finally, he stopped again. "We are home," he said. Agbomma lifted her eyes and froze. Before her stood not a proud compound, not the lively homestead of a wealthy man, but an abandoned hut. The walls were cracked and sagging, covered in thick cobwebs that glittered in the morning dew. The roof had gaping holes where sunlight streamed in. and the crooked door hung weakly on its hinges. Around it, wild grasses and thorny vines choked the ground, climbing waist-high. The place looked lifeless, dead. Agbomma's voice trembled. "Here? You live here?" Nduka's reply was calm, almost casual. "Number, this is not where I live." He paused. His eyes locked on hers. "This is where I died, 10 years ago." The words struck her like a spear. She staggered back, her hands flying to her mouth. Her mind reeled, piecing together every sign: the silent steps, the water from nothing, the river walked like earth, the voices in the trees. Her husband was no man. He was a spirit, a ghost. Her chest tightened with panic. She opened her mouth to scream, to call for help, to beg her ancestors to protect her. But Nduka raised his hand, and her voice vanished. She tried again. No sound came out. Her throat worked, her lips moved, but silence swallowed everything. The terror multiplied within her, trapped with nowhere to escape, festering like poison in her chest. Agbomma's scream was now only inside her head. Agbomma could not run, for her legs no longer obeyed her. It was as though invisible ropes bound her feet to the earth, holding her in place. She stood frozen, powerless, trapped at the mercy of the creature who had deceived her into believing he was a man of flesh and blood. Inside the ruined hut, her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and horror struck her heart. Skeletons lay scattered across the floor, their bones twisted and broken where they had fallen. Some still wore the tattered remains of wedding garments, faded beads clinging to rib cages, shreds of wrappers draped over lifeless frames. They were not strangers. They were women, wives, brides like her. Nduka's calm voice cut through the silence. He spoke with an ease that made her blood run cold. These were his wives, he explained, women he had charmed, courted, and carried away from their villages. One each year, for 10 years. They had all ended here, in this cursed hut. He needed a bride each season, he said, to keep his hold on the living world. Each wife served her purpose before joining the others in death. Agbomma's stomach churned. She looked at the bones and tried to imagine their final moments. Did they scream? Did they fight? Did they hope for rescue that never came? She saw her own fate in their hollow eye sockets. Another skeleton left to rot among them. Another nameless victim of his hunger. She refused to accept it. She would not die here, not like this. Fear clawed at her, but so did the will to survive. She forced herself to study every corner of the hut, every crack in the walls, searching for a weakness. Her eyes lingered on Nduka, watching his movements, his habits, his strange routines, desperate to find a flaw in his power. Days passed in dreadful silence. By day, Nduka sat in one corner, unmoving, his glowing eyes fixed on nothing. Sometimes he whispered to the skeletons as if they were alive, asking them questions, laughing softly at jokes only he understood. This disturbed Agbomma even more than his sorcery. His mind was not human. There was no mercy to appeal to. At night, his routine changed. He would lie down in a rigid posture, arms crossed over his chest, legs straight as though laid out for burial. In that position, something eerie happened. His breathing stopped, his eyes closed, and his body turned as cold as stone. Agbomma realized with a shock. He was not sleeping. He was dying. Each night his spirit left his body, crossing into the world of the dead, and at dawn it returned. This nightly death and resurrection was the secret of his power, the reason he could exist in both worlds, but it was also his weakness. If she could keep his spirit from reuniting with his body, he would be lost forever. The key lay in his posture, the burial-like position that tethered him to both realms. Disrupt it, and she could trap him where he truly belonged. Night after night she watched closely, memorizing every detail, every angle of his body, waiting for her moment. She kept her face blank by day, careful not to reveal her discovery. If he suspected she knew, he might change his ways and her chance would vanish. Finally, The night came. Agbomma lay quietly on her mat, forcing her breath to remain steady, her body still. She pretended to be broken, to have surrendered. She waited until his breathing stopped, until his body grew cold and stiff, until she was certain his spirit had departed. Her heart pounded like a drum inside her chest. This was her one chance. Nduka had taken many wives before Agbomma, but none escaped him. Their bones still whispered in that ruined hut, silent witnesses to his hunger. Yet Agbomma was different. She discovered his secret, turned his power against him, and broke the chain of death that had trapped so many before her. From that night on, his spirit roamed, restless and furious, searching for a way back into the living world. Some nights, when the crickets suddenly fall silent and the air grows unnaturally cold, the people of Agbomma say they hear a faint knock at their doors, 3 slow raps, followed by nothing but silence. Others whisper that at the far end of the village, a shadow sometimes lingers where no man stands, its eyes glowing faintly before vanishing with the first cockcrow. But Nduka never claimed another bride. Agbomma was the one who defied him, and her name lived on, not as another skeleton in his cursed hut, but as a warning carved into the memory of the people. My friends, what do you think? Was Nduka truly gone, or is his spirit still wandering, looking for another bride? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more chilling folktales like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive.